All right, so Cowboys Nation, of course we know that we have a we still have a major hole at the running back position. Excuse if you're hearing honking going on, in the background. That's somebody who is really irritating me and getting on my nerves right now, but you know, I'm just gonna leave that alone. Either way, yeah, we know that Cowboys Nation. We all know that, of course, there is a major hole in the position at running back. Currently, right now, our running back room is Deuce Vaughn and Rico Dowdle. And I think it's safe to say that everybody knows that those two guys are just not going to bust a grape. So obviously, we're looking to target a running back in the draft, possibly in the first round. What I heard is that Mike McCarthy was at Michigan's Pro Day and he was watching Michigan's running back, Blake Corum. And basically, it had me thinking, and I want to go over my top five running back choices that I would like to be welcomed to Dallas Cowboy Nation. And welcome to the Dallas Cowboy organization. So, there is Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Dylan Johnson, and Braylon Allen. Those are the five running backs that I will look at their stats. And we are going to start off with, of course, the person that you have been looking at so far these last 2 minutes or so. And that is Blake Corum out of Michigan. Blake Corum was a starter for Michigan for 3 years, 3 years as a starter. His first year, 2021, he carried the rock 144 times and he ran for 952 rushing yards, 6.6 yards a carry, and 11 rushing touchdowns. Now, that's a pretty solid first year season. Um, and then he took an even bigger leap his second season. In his second year, he carried the ball 247 times for 1,463 yards, 5.9 yards a carry, and 18 rushing touchdowns. And then his final season, of course, this past year for Michigan, which, of course, they won the Natty. Um, he carried the ball 258 times and rushed for 1,245 yards. So his rushing yards dropped a bit, but not by much, averaging 4.8 yards a carry and 27 rushing touchdowns. Now, I know some people will say that 4.8 dropping like that and his yards per carry dropping like that year by year might be a concern. But the fact of the matter is that, of course, his yards per carry was going to start dropping because his carries, of course, have increased, and that's going to mess with your yards per carry on average a little bit, especially if you have opposing defenses trying to key in on your running game. Stop the running game first, then worry about the passing game second. And that's basically what teams have been doing. Key stat that is not on my stat line, however, that not very many people know. In the time that Blake Corum was in Michigan in college, the Michigan Wolverines were 31-0 when Blake Corum scored a touchdown. So basically, you can almost call it a guaranteed W if he finds himself in the end zone. Probably my biggest concern about him going into this draft, as far as interest of him, is, well, first of all, he's 5'8" and 200 pounds, so he's small in stature. Now, of course, there was a long time ago, the Dallas Cowboys drafted a running back that was small in stature, and he just turned out to just do nothing but become the all-time leading rusher in all of football and, become a Hall of Famer. So, maybe his size shouldn't be that big of a problem. But yeah, that's probably my only, concern that I have out of him, really. So, on to the next running back, which is Trey Benson. Trey Benson, 2 years as a starter at Florida State. And in his 2 years, he had very little touches, but pretty big production. Even with those very little amount of touches, he made the absolute most of them. In 2022, he carried the ball 154 times for 990 yards, 6.4 yards a carry, and 9 rushing touchdowns. So he was just shy of 1,000 that season. And then this past season, in 2023, he carried the ball 156 times for 906 yards, 5.8 yards a carry, and 14 rushing touchdowns. Now, I didn't watch a whole lot of Florida State, but I will say that they are an ideal pass team. They are, I would say they are more on the balanced side, but they are an ideal passing team. Trey Benson wasn't given a whole lot of touches, but as I said, when he did get the touches, he made the absolute most of it. And I had to put him in my top 5 running backs of interest going into this draft. Now, my biggest as far as my biggest concern that I have about Trey Benson, I would say my biggest concern about him might only be that he has a very limited amount of touches. That might be my only concern out of him, though. He had very little amount of touches in college. Just over 300, touches in the 2 years. Gives you some Tony Pollard vibes. But I will say, I think, he has potential to be better than Tony Pollard. But that is my one concern about him. Up next, we have Jonathan Brooks. Now, Jonathan Brooks had only 1 year as a starter. So that is a concern, just a concern right there, is that he has very little amount of experience. However, in that 1 year of experience, of course, this past season, he came in for the guy who was our week 1 starting running back, number 1 back. He got injured, and that allowed Jonathan Brooks, of course, to blossom and explode onto the scene. He carried the ball 187 times for 1,139 rushing yards, averaging 6.1 yards per carry and 10 rushing TDs. Now, he was doing very well in the 11 games that he played until he sadly, of course, got injured. He tore his ACL near the end of the season. And that, of course, is a major concern because, a guy heading into the draft and, he has a significant injury like that. obviously gives you some major concerns and makes you maybe want to back off a little. And I will, speak more prominent on that after I, get done with the rest of these running backs. But those are my two concerns, is that he has very little experience and he's coming off of a significant injury that he suffered that ended his final season in college. But he was absolutely a huge reason for Texas, being put in the position that they were in. It's just tragic and unfortunate what happened to him. Up next, we have Dillon Johnson. Dillon Johnson, again, only 1 year as a starter. In that one season, however, this past year, he carried the ball 233 times for just shy of 1,200 yards with 1,195, 5.1 yards a carry, and 16 rushing touchdowns. Now, people don't really talk about this guy that much, just mainly off of the fact that Washington was known, of course, for throwing the ball down the field. You got Michael Penix Jr. throwing it down the field to guys like Odunze and etc. So you don't really talk about the running game and Dillon Johnson that much, just based off of the fact that Washington, they threw the ball. They're a pass-oriented team. So, yeah. Now, unfortunately, of course, he did get injured in the playoffs against Texas. However, it was only like a sprain of some sort, so nothing truly significant. So I wouldn't really call that a concern on my book as far as concerns for him going into the draft. And can't really say that he has lack of experience, because even if you take away this past season, he had, some touches in his first 3 years, in college, and he put up solid numbers, as a complementary piece in the running game. Then, of course, he became the full-time back this past season, and he, of course, shined and blossomed. I guess the only concern you have about Dillon Johnson is the system that he played in, where they threw the ball down the field. So your main concern was not Dillon Johnson trying to stop Dillon Johnson. And maybe that opened up some running lanes in space, but it's not the biggest concern, because, Marshall Faulk exists. And lastly, I have Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen, just like Blake Corum, 3 years as a starter. In 2021, as a true freshman, he carried the ball 186 times for 1,268 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, and 12 rushing touchdowns. Now, unfortunately, I would say that was his best season, but either way, it was still a sign of things to come for people who were like, who is this kid? So, either way, then his second year, he carried the ball 230 times for 1,242 yards, 5.4 yards a carry, and 11 rushing touchdowns. Then his final season, he carried the ball 181 times for 984 yards, 5.4 yards a carry, however, and 12 rushing touchdowns. So his rushing yards did drop quite a bit. And that is probably my main concern, is why did his rushing yards drop that much from 1,200 to 900? But he's a big back. He's 6'2", 245 pounds. Now, a concern that I looked at, was that, and the thing is, this is the case for a lot of bigger backs. He's more of a north-south runner, and he's not much of an east-west runner. He can't really move laterally that well. And going into the NFL, of course, you would like for him to have a little bit of versatility to be able to run to wherever he wants to go and wherever a run is designed to go. So, but that was a big concern that I had for him. But big back, he'll be hard to tackle, and just an old school type running back, almost like a taller version of Jerome Bettis, only without the big gut. He doesn't really have a big gut. He's just big, 245 pounds. So I looked at these 5 running backs, and going down the list, Blake Corum might not fall to 24 for us, so that might be unlikely. But if he does happen to fall to us, that will be an absolute miracle, and I sure as hell hope that we definitely draft him. He's got the most experience here and probably the most production as well. And, he showed, of course, his impact and value for Michigan as they won the national championship. And they dominated Washington thoroughly. And then, of course, Trey Benson could... My bad. I had the hiccups. Trey Benson could also maybe get drafted before pick number 24. Maybe. I would say it's definitely a higher possibility with him. So I think we'll definitely have a chance with him being there on the board. But it's very likely that he might even get drafted before our pick, which is 24. And then Jonathan Brooks, I think we'll definitely have an opportunity to get him. I mean, there's no question about it. We'll definitely have an opportunity to get him at pick number 24. He is coming off of a significant injury, so that's what, of course, is going to cause a lot of scouts to be a little scarce of him. And this is such a Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones type move to draft a guy that had a significant injury in college and then go ahead and draft him in the draft. Very Jones's type of a pick. Now, granted, this is no slight to Jonathan Brooks. You can, of course, draft him and still be able to know that you have a guy that has great potential for the future. Implement him into the offense, loosely his rookie year, and then, give him some touches here and there. And then his second year, you can give him a much more fuller workload, knowing that he's going to be at better health as far as injury is concerned. Is he a guy that I would want to draft with my first round pick? It's definitely a gamble. I would, because the thing is, your thought process is I could maybe get him in the second or third round and still get somebody in the first that will probably, shine for me, from opening day forward, But I don't know. I don't know. Like, you could, of course, like take that, gamble, but I don't know. It's kind of iffy for me, but that would be pretty cool, but, would be quite a heck of a story. And then Dillon Johnson. Dillon Johnson, I think he absolutely is going to be there. And I think, if anything, he's probably the safest pick out of all of these running backs. He's probably the safest pick because you're getting a guy who has good size, good size, good speed. He doesn't lack that much experience, and he's also not coming off of a significant injury either, of any sorts. And yeah, again, he's definitely going to be there at pick number 24. So I would say he's probably the safest pick if you were to draft a running back in the first round. So would I pick him? Yes, I would. He would be the safest pick out of all these running backs because he would be there. And I definitely have the utmost confidence that he will definitely be very productive from day one. And then lastly, Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is a bit of a gamble because, again, you're talking about a guy who, again, he's 6'2", 245 pounds, big back, and your biggest concern probably is how long he can last on the field, like, and is he a guy that, could at some point end up downgrading himself to being mainly a short yardage back. So I don't know if I would make that pick, take that chance. I would take that chance if you had an opportunity to get him later, like in the fourth round, third or fourth round, But my first round pick, I don't know about that. Like I said, we have a major hole at the running back position. And at this point, I would definitely like to draft a running back with our first round pick. A guy that I know for a fact can be an impact player day one for this team. So to close out, I kind of just answered that question, but I'm going to give you guys a drum roll, please. Drum roll. What running back would I like us to draft with our first pick? It is Trey Benson. It is absolutely Trey Benson. My bad. It's Dillon Johnson. Okay. It's Dillon Johnson. I'm sorry. Okay. I can't believe I fumbled. I can't believe I fumbled the bag like that. I accidentally said Trey Benson. I meant to say Dillon Johnson. I meant to say Dillon Johnson. That, in my opinion, is the running back that I would want to draft because he's definitely going to be there at pick number 24, and you don't have to worry about him as far as injuries, as far as his health. And I think he could definitely be a impact player day one for this team and be a starter. Zeke can, of course, mentor him, a bit. Like if we were to still, of course, re-sign Ezekiel Elliott. And, we can use him as our starting running back and be our main back, getting the main workload. So, to all of my audience, this is Mr. Cowboys fan out.